Okay, can everybody see that? Green, or can you see that, Corinne?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, that's it, because I have two screens here and I'm not sure what I can see now. Okay, so, you know, even from the first image here, you see that's the back of my head staring at the sea. But I guess what I've done here as well, and you'll see that there's a motif around the sea, and it's something that, you know, a space that's really important for me, and again links back, I guess, to my own experience around the perimenopause and managing the different I guess things that are happening for me along the way, particularly the anxiety. And so swimming has been something in the sea at all times of the year, and in the very cold Irish Sea, it's been something that has helped me to regulate. So what I'm going to do here now is, you'll see this is a little bit of writing here, and it's a reflection. And again, rather than use some of the raw data from my own, from the participants, I'm using some of my own reflections, which are part of my reflexive process anyway, alongside the research. I'm going to just read this out. And what I'd like you to do is to just really listen to this. And as you're listening, to kind of get a sense of what you're feeling as you're listening to what's being said. And again, wondering a little bit around how you might represent that through the body. So I'll read it anyway, and then what we'll do is we're going to pick out some key words from that and just look at physicalizing them. I look in the mirror and no longer recognize my body. It feels as if my insides are falling out. I'm tired and angry. My bones ache. I can't even wear my good knickers to cheer myself up. So I'm just going to take that again one more time. And the idea again is to just really listen. And so when we talk about listen, we're talking about active listening, in a sense of not just with the ears, but really listening with all parts of ourselves, and recognizing what, if anything, is coming up for you through the body. I look in the mirror and no longer recognize my body. It feels as if my insides are falling out. I'm tired and angry. My bones ache. I can't even wear my good knickers to cheer myself up. So taking maybe two words, tired and angry, let's just see, again, in this experiential space, how you might represent tired. So we're going kind of quite simply with two of these words. So in a count of three, in 1, 2, 3, how might you embody that? How might you embody tiredness? And then just releasing that. And then to angry. So how might that show up in the body? In 1, 2, 3. And release. So the reason I shared this slide and invite you to participate in embodying, or, you know, physicalizing two aspects of what's been said here, is because it's very much of what the playback theatre process does. So a playback theatre process is, it starts with a conductor and then a teller, so somebody who is going to tell the story, and 3 actors who are listening to the story as well as it's being told, and then they embody the story. So they represent that physically, and it can be done in a number of ways. So it can be done through traditional kind of theatre style, where they might vocalize it or create a little scene, or they might do sculpts, which is like taking a position and holding it. And then the teller gets to look at that, and when the piece is over, the conductor goes back to the teller and asks them, you know, what did you think of that? Did that kind of capture where you were going with it? Yeah, yay or nay, and a discussion ensues. And all the time it's been witnessed by an audience. So in the case of my own work, what I did was I brought 10 women together who were in a in the stage of perimenopause. And this is how we worked. So instead of doing a traditional interview, each woman had an opportunity to be the teller, but also an actor and a witness. And so each woman's story, you know, was facilitated by myself, and then interpreted by 3 of the members of the group. And then afterwards, there was a reflective discussion. So narrative inquiry, just look at 3 kind of definitions. It studies the ways humans experience the world narratively. It's a way of understanding experience through the exploration of personal stories. And it's a mode of qualitative research in which researchers describe and analyze stories as they're told by individuals or groups. So experience, you know, how we as humans overall, you know, what is it that we're experiencing, and how do we describe it, and how do we understand our experience? The different ways, I mean, of, I suppose, going at the same thing, you know, trying to understand what it is to be human and how we describe that. And further to that, narrative inquiry involves a reconstruction of a person's experience in relationship to both the other and to a social milieu. So I guess from this point or position, this is what interested me in terms of bringing a group of women together, the collective, and looking at how they spoke about their experiences of perimenopause, and what, you know, the sharing of that would, you know, how that might, I suppose, facilitate further discussion around individual experiences, but also that, you know, by talking together and working together through something, that it kind of opens up further understanding, or, you know, windows of understanding to the experience. And particularly, I suppose, because it's within that social group, you know, this group of women at a certain age in their lives, you know, and coming together to share that and to speak, I guess, you know, openly about it, which again is a very interesting, an interesting point, because, you know, when I started this research 4 years ago, there was very little on perimenopause, and in the last 2 years, it's just absolutely exploded. There was a program, it's a popular radio program here in Ireland, it's called The Joe Duffy Show, and they had the topic on there, and it just suddenly kind of erupted from there. You know, it was amazing, the response that was received, you know, and women kind of really getting, ringing in and generating huge conversation, and suddenly began to talk about something that had really never been spoken about before. And certainly what was coming to light was this really, you know, struggle to understand what was happening, and a sense of kind of being railroaded, you know, by the symptoms, you know, or their experiences of perimenopause, and not knowing that that's what it was, or linking it to menopause at all. So suddenly we go from not really having any conversation to this kind of big eruption of it. And I guess in some ways hijacking of it to a certain degree as well, by celebrities, and also by vitamin companies, and then the whole HRT piece as well. So it just starts to get really, really big. I've just gone probably too far on my slides there. The mouse dropped. I'll go back this way. You know, we're okay. Yeah. So what did I want to do? There's a picture of me swimming in the sea into the unknown, and you see the happy face there. I had an idea, I had this idea, um, you know, and I guess that whole kind of piece around that passion, or where I come from in terms of performance and facilitation and bringing people together. So an excitement about, I suppose, engaging with women in this way. And I was very lucky to get 10 women who were really open to that. And obviously, when I put out the call for that, it was very clear about what would be expected of people in terms of the research. And certainly all the women that showed up on the day were really open to working creatively and to stepping into the unknown. So I wanted to facilitate a conversation. I wanted to hear individual stories and explore them through witnessing, playback, and the body. And so we've touched on that a little bit when I talk about the framework of playback theatre, which is very much, the witnessing is the audience, but each woman in the group of those 10 women all had that opportunity to be witnesses, to witness and be witnessed as well. And the idea of being able to kind of play back, I don't know if any of you are here on old enough to remember cassettes tapes, but it wasn't like Spotify. You had to rewind. The crowd says rewind, and then we rewind, but you had to rewind your tape and play back. And in doing that, the idea of being able to kind of press pause and go back and replay something live, while the interview is kind of happening, for me is a really rich way of working. You're getting to kind of listen on so many different levels. So from that point of view, in terms of working with the group and being able to facilitate this space where a story is told and then played back and then discussed, meant that I was kind of getting a much kind of richer, deeper data, really. And then thirdly, I wanted to work through the body because I believe in it. Is that a good enough thing to say? Is that, or it's the way that I go about things, and I'm really interested in how the body speaks. And I guess as well from that point of view, one of the first pieces I would have written just before the doctorate was through the IACAT, which is the Irish Association of Creative Arts Therapists, and we have an online journal called Polyphony, and there was an invitation to write about a piece of your work, and they had done a little workshop on writing the language of the body, and I was intrigued by that, and this notion of, and being able to write from an embodied perspective, but also that freed me up a little bit because I'd never really seen myself as an academic. I really thought I'm just a practitioner, but with this, it was almost like permission to write authentically, to speak from within, speak through the body. And I wrote a piece around my work with Rhythm Room called The Moving Body, which looked at our work, Love, Lost, Life, a piece that we had created over a couple of years, using very much this framework as well to look at people's experiences of love and loss. I'm just going to check the time because I wonder how am I doing on time, Corinne? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sorry.
Yeah,
that's good, Nicola. If you just I guess you're going to talk about the process a bit more, and normally people go for like for 40 minutes or 50 minutes, and then we have so great.
That's great. Yeah, we're going to come up to that soon. So again, with this was the group and the individual reflection, which happened within that group process as well. And I get to look here is we'll see is just some ways of representing some of the findings so far. So what that yielded. So here we have the participants on the left-hand side, and what I asked each participant to do was to come up with some keywords or phrases, when they had finished speaking about their experience. So to kind of condense it into something. And these were what the actors, how they represented it, you know. So some of the keywords that were coming up were hypervigilance, guarding, and the representation was like a wall or a defense and a lookout. The topsy-turviness of it, the judgments, what's made on you, batty, crazy lady. So we have a fluid sculpt of an actor moving up and down, another being in judgment, looking down her nose, and the last grabbing her crotch. The unknown and how to give it a place. What am I getting into? There's no space for this important time. So the actor's representation was about wonder, or this idea of a box, or looking into a big dark pool. So getting kind of stuck in a box. And from there we moved into, I moved it into looking at, you know, through thematic clusters. So this is just like a little, trying to move something out of the way here, sorry. See. There we go. So, for example, like the gray area or the transition, perimenopause transition as a cluster, a root system, lived experience, hormones as another cluster, sex as a cluster, women's health and medical support. So some of the voices that were within these clusters were, for example, in the perimenopause transition, anger, frustration, lack of understanding, grief, loss, hopelessness, loneliness, shame, physical changes. Or in the root system or lived experience, past traumas resurfacing and finding that you're not where you thought you were and you have to go back and do more work on yourself, or old patterns repeating and then the impact of them during this transitional phase, hopelessness. So this is kind of like from where we start with the playback itself, and I guess, you know, the scripts that were kind of coming up and the key words into the embodiment brought out the script. So we're going to just have a quick look at those, and from that, this is called How Many Fucks Do I Have to Give? So just to read that out a little bit as well, maybe it'd be good to do it. I don't know what it is about today. I wasn't expecting it. Gestures to belly, but I'm full of emotion. Like I'm really stuffed with it. It's ready to pour out and I don't have a major reason for that. So like I get quite angry, I think. I think that's the thing that I still have. I need to sort out. I get quite angry and stuff. The world, judgment, my ex, like how hard life is. Why can't I have a house? Like all that stuff. I get very angry, and maybe that's what this emotion is. Elizabeth. Something I like is the anger, actually, because I'm going to therapy on and off since 2008. And my therapist gestures me, oh, I feel scared, I feel anxious. And she's like, what about anger? And I'm like, no, I don't feel anger. What about anger? Laughs. No. Laughs. And the audience is also laughing. So this feeling, the rage in my belly, even though it can be misdirected, it's a nice feeling. It's a nice angry sound. It's kind of, I'm enjoying not necessarily the fact that it's misdirected, but just learning to channel into that energy and feeling the strength. And that I like. Janet, I really felt the anger was stay away from me. I've never experienced anger, like you said, empowerment, like good anger. It's usually the destroying one. So at the moment, what I have, as it's still in the analysis kind of stage and writing up the findings around it, been playing around with what to do with it all, you know. And I got pulled in the direction of restoring. And then again, there's a lot here, but for me, a couple of months back, the data was really saying, put me into a story, you know. And it's something that I've played around with, but I've subsequently moved back from that And I want to come back into kind of maybe just using what I have. And I get that this was, I was chatting to Karina about it then at the beginning here of the seminar, but I guess the playback has already given me the kind of scripts and the way of presenting the data. And I guess it's to trust it as well. Trust the process that I went for, you know, and that I was adamant that I was going to do. So why am I sharing that now? Because I think there's that push pull, isn't it? You know, you're trying to figure out, you have so much data and you could go many different directions with it. But Mishi Narumono is the Japanese for the unknown. And this is one of the huge pieces that are coming up out of the data, is this unknown period, you know, for women, and this transition, and what that means for women, you know, and how do we negotiate it, navigate it, how do we pass through this, you know, how do we make it out the other side? So while I probably won't, for this piece of, you know, this doctorate, use this restorying now, I'm really glad that I've begun the process of it, because I feel that it's probably going to link into other pieces of research. So maybe just even to kind of share just a little bit or read the first part. A woman crouches beside a dark pool of water. Her belly is soft, her breasts touch her knees. Her joints ache in unusual places. There are lines at the corner of her eyes, and her once firm skin is drier yet softer. Like good paper you might write a love letter on. When she sees a reflection in the water, she is shocked. Who is this woman staring back at her? Where is the real her gone? She brings her hand to the water's surface and breaks the reflection, pushing the water this way and that. She searches for something, but it's too dark to see anything. The water defies her hand and moves back into place. There's nothing for her here on the surface. She will have to go deeper. She looks over her shoulder and sees the smoke curling from the chimney of her house on the hill. There, waiting for her, is a full laundry basket. Her teenage sons have taken over the living room and are loudly playing the PlayStation, with several uninvited guests who are present through a microphone, eavesdropping on the comings and goings of the house. A computer blinks in an upstairs bedroom, a to-do list as long as your arm beside it, a notebook with furious calculations making ends meet resting on the pillow of an unmade bed. There is no man in this house. It is not an unhappy place. It is a life. But the woman yearns for more, for a quiet space to embrace this change that is happening inside her. For a moment, she is torn by the call of duty. The boys need her to cook dinner. The washing machine needs to go on. That paper won't write itself. And it's not like her not to make her bed and be careless with her sons. The pull of the house is strong, but stronger still is her desire to know herself again. She turns towards the water. Her reflection smiles at her, beckoning her. She removes her clothes and steps towards the water, one foot following the other, breaking the water's surface. She moves deeper and deeper until she is fully submerged. Her journey has begun. So I'm going to stop the share there and just bring it back to you guys and open up the conversation. If I can get my mouse to work and stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicola. That's really hopefully going to stimulate people to ask some questions, and really interesting way of working, I think, that exemplifies quite a lot of different areas that people are exploring in narrative research, really. So thank you. Yeah. Okay, I can see a question from Anne-Laure. And are there any other people who are going to ask questions? In fact, it's a small group. You know, we might even go round and at some point and ask people to talk about their interest in this area. But
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. But anyway, we could start with Anne-Laure, right? So you're there, Anne-Laure. Do bring your question.
Well, first of all, thank you ever so much, Nicola. This was so interesting, and it's some of it in terms of your background and stuff really resonates with me. I'm just glad I'm over that menopause hill. So glad over it and survived it. Hey, exactly. Yeah, so what I wanted to touch on, because it's that kind of very grey, funny area. So narrative inquiry is a very fluid space where anything can happen. And I like your idea, your image of this sort of invited academic into this world. I feel very much like an invited academic. And so I struggle, and I was wondering if you also struggle with using your instincts and your gut feelings to move this in one direction or another. How do you struggle, or do you struggle, and how do you cope with academia demanding references all the time? You have to reference. It's like you're not allowed to have these gut feelings about stuff. You're not allowed to create anything. You are constantly expected to kind of rely back on references. So, sometimes you have to find the closest one to what you're trying to do, or you have to be, nobody can know the whole of the literature, and the literature also is a moving, living thing that expands all the time. So I was wondering how you're working with this, in terms of, as you said, permission to write from within, from the body. This is so powerful. So how do you make that fit within academia? Because there are all these sets of expectations there.
Yeah, it's been really challenging. It's been quite the experience. Moving from that practitioner place into this. But I guess, being in a taught doctorate program has been really helpful from that point of view. And I guess the first 2 years were really around like getting you to write and learning how to do that. But I had to be very autodidactic about it. There was a huge amount I had to learn myself. So I mean, I know how to write, right? But with this whole academic way of learning and writing was something I'm only really coming to grips with now. It's taken me ages, and it's draft after draft after draft of literature review and methodology chapter. And now I find that I can read much quicker, and and I'm able to get I can understand, but my God, I have to read things over and over and over and over again to get them to make sense, because I'm an embodied learner, So like, it wasn't a case of sort of being able to read it and just take it in. I have to kind of almost dance it. And my supervisor said, well, maybe you can dance your viva, or whatever. But there's a bit of truth in that, So by work, conversations and leaning into other people who work in the area. And I had an opportunity to go to Denmark to the summer school last year. That was incredible. I really felt out of my depth. There was so much kind of imposter syndrome going on, but I just trusted it, and I link it back to kind of the process that I'm in terms of understanding myself during this period of time. So it's a curious mix of being able to find my voice. I'm finding my voice, but also that imposter piece. And that's another huge finding within the research for women in this period of their lives, of feeling like an imposter, who am I? What have I got? Or, doubting the self, So it's it has been challenging, but ultimately really rewarding and exciting, and I suppose that's the way that I am in my life anyway. So I tend to be curious about things or take on challenges and not let them swamp me, I don't know if that's helpful or not. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that could be helpful. I hope so. I mean, it's very nice to have somebody actually embodying what, but emblematizing what some of the people in ANRP have talked about for a long time, which is you don't need to make very strong distinctions between narrative research and narrative practice, because often there's a lot of commonalities, and especially because what narrative is really, a lot of times it's a kind of theory from below. can be articulated through bodies, like you're saying. I think let me just ask Katrina though to I think you made a comment, didn't? Oh no, there's some other people in the comments, but Katrina, please.
Hi there. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic to start my day listening to you. And in fact, your timing for getting us into our bodies was great, because I was just sitting down on my yoga mat to do my morning stretches, and then you were saying, get into your body. So it was really nice for me. And I'm now feeling like I can actually speak. Your presentation resonated with me on so many levels. I guess I have always wanted to do something more sort of to do with that theatre therapy overlap, but I don't work in either of those fields, but I'm very interested in embodied sense making, I suppose, and my research is around embodied sense making. So yeah, you've inspired me a lot. I'm not sure what to ask, except I suppose one of the things that comes to mind is around, I'm very interested that you're using the term perimenopause, and because I've certainly noticed over these years that I've been experiencing these things myself, that there's been a sudden surge in talk about the topic of perimenopause, menopause, and I'm wondering about your choice to use perimenopause, I suppose, because and also I noticed you mentioned, you briefly mentioned symptoms, and then you said experiences, and I suppose when I'm listening to media on this topic that's coming out, there's a lot of talk about symptoms, and I'm very resistant to that. I'm very critical of medicalization, and so thinking, how can we reclaim these experiences, which is exactly what you're doing. How can we reclaim these, and is part of that going to be in relabeling? So I'm wondering about perimenopause and menopause as medically constructed categories that define periods of our life, and how might we relabel that in order to reclaim it and not experience it as a symptom-full process, but rather as something we can share and learn from together.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I mean, I feel that that's what happened with the women coming together. It's a sense of like bringing women together to kind of to chat about what's going on and our experiences, and I think coming back to that kind of the vernacular piece or shared knowledge, there's certainly great power in that, and I feel that that's probably what we have been doing, and it is something that is coming up for me, and I'm more and more in my reflexive notes around this, Katrina, like God, are we doing ourselves more harm here, because it's a sense of not the fact that we can be open and honest about something, but it's been just jumped on, by everybody now, so it's a thing. But I suppose for me, why perimenopause? Well, like I was just so floored about what was happening to me, and I knew I wasn't in menopause, but there was no information around this period of time. Where the ovaries are in decline and things are dropping in, and there's a potential for stuff to be happening. And in my case, it was. I mean, it's like someone came over and hit me over the back of the head with a hammer or something. I was just totally discombobulated, and it was a really frightening experience for me. And it's one that I've had to work really hard through over the last 8 years, really, to be sort of as well in myself as I am today. So from one end, like knowing that this was a period of time gave me great comfort, in a sense, was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Like that, it helped me to make sense of it, but on the other, and again, like, on the other, then you don't want to appropriate it or medicalized too much. And what's interesting is that actually I found this piece of writing was 150 years ago, and it was in this medical journal, book, right? And it's this can't think of his name just off the top of my head, but a physician, and it was around women kind of going mad in this period, right? And women being brought in under psychiatric care, but what his reflection on was that it's a time that creates all of this kind of chaos in women, but that once they pass through it, they have the potential to reconstruct themselves almost. So this is 150 years ago, sort of written by a man around his experiences of women during this period. but seeing it as a time of discombobulation, but once passed through the opportunity for growth and reconstruction of the self, which I just found really interesting. So, I mean, it's something that has been around for a long time, or we know about it, you know, we do, but we don't, you know, or and even then, you know, there's lots of different books that have been written over you know, the last number of years, but you wouldn't have access to those unless you went looking, you know. And now that all this information is coming out there, it's not really those books that are coming up. It's more around the symptom piece, the medicalized piece, the rush for the HRT, which then links back to the early 60s when, you know, HRT came out, and it was about keep them young, you know, do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of raising way more questions than answering any, you know, so to say. So yeah. My teenage son coming in.
I'm just wondering if there's some of the other people in the comments might like to come back on this. Like Karina says that she's really interested in narrative and performance and affect, and I think that must be a more general interest then, Karina. So it'd be good to hear about, you know, where your interest is leading you and what the kind of commonalities might be. Oh, has she left actually? I see she says sorry for having to leave.
Oh, okay. But Anne Laura says it's even worse than medicalization. It's pathologization of experiences, not taking away the awfulness of it from many women. Yeah. And it can be awful, you know, that's the thing.
Sure, Tracy. Tracy says there's two Tracys, but this is Tracy Costello, I think. Hi,
Yeah.
Tracy.
Hi there. I'm just going to pull in. I'm listening to you as I'm on the way home. 1 second now. Here I am. So, hi Nicola and everybody. My name is Tracy. I'm a practicing dramatherapist in Ireland here. I suppose just to comment on, like, I'm 37, nearly 38 years of age, and I'm at that point where perimenopause is definitely something that's coming in to my I suppose stratosphere. And I think I'm just really struck by, I was like, I don't even know why I'm in attendance, you know, that kind of way. I think it's just that kind of information piece, that kind of, I suppose we've been, like, as an Irish woman, an Irish Catholic woman, there's been such an embodiment of shame around the female form, the female, you know, reproductive system, all of these different things. And I think it was something like, I think it was 33 before I realized, what do you mean I have to deal with menopause? What's this part that I have to deal with now? And there was no information around it. And again, I'm faced this unknown piece. And I think I'm struck by the previous commenter, I think it's Karina, just about relabeling and taking that medicalization away. And then reminded as well, Nicola, what you said about the physicians from 150 years is making me think of, you know, women in hysteria. You know, I think it was Freud who was in hysteria, and just that piece of, oh gosh, looking on at you know, God, look at them there, them poor creatures, you know, they're just going through the motions, whatever they're up to, instead of embracing it as just another part of femalehood, you know, that kind of, that next piece. You know, I've 3 children, you know, I'm assuming I'm kind of coming to the end of that part of my life, you know, where the children are born and now my body is changing again, and I don't recognize it as such, but moving into that as the next ritual, the next milestone of my life, that it's to be embraced. What can I expect, rather than just being pushed away? Like, I'm really struck by this need to, yeah, that restory. Just let's embrace it. Let's take the fear out of it, you know. Yeah, I don't know, it's just something I had to comment on. I just really feel very strongly about it. I don't know, it was just something I needed to name out loud. Am I on the right track, Nicola? Is this what this work is? Because it has struck me and has, you know, evoked me, you know, to come into it, you know.
Yeah, I really feel, well, for me personally, yeah, Tracy, it is, you know, in the sense for me around transformation, or, you know, transformation, from one state to another, and so less about needing to cure this, but to understand what is happening, to exactly embrace it. And again, when that was where I started, in terms of the research, and I wondered what would other women be like, would they have the same thing to say about it? And from the small research pool that I'm doing, yes, they do, and it is very much about the unknown, embracing the unknown, transition, and how we go about it, our own voices, etc. And yeah, what lies beyond it, and I guess barriers to that as well, barriers to transition. And I'm really glad, to hear you bring up that, as another sort of Irish woman as well, but the church, and the grip that the church had on us, in terms of that shame piece as well, and stigma. Yeah, and I was recently speaking about it, and I was likening ourselves, our older selves, as potentially to the dried fruit. And I happen to really like dried fruit, but the idea that because we do dry out, the mucous membranes dry up a little, but there's this lovely there's a lusciousness to dried fruit, right? The figs and the dates, and they're really nutritious. And so this idea of seeing ourselves as that, and not something that is just a kind of wizened old husk of something. And again, that links back into the whole kind of the standards of beauty, or how women perceive themselves. And another interesting kind of take on it as well is like, well, as these female hormones are in decline, what does that mean for us as women now? Am I still woman, or with loss of fertility, etc.? So there's a huge piece that I believe needs to be looked at, or that we need to engage with, right? And yes, that was my personal take on it, and I'm really glad to see that that's kind of what's coming up through the data as well, that women want to explore it. And I think it needs to happen, in terms of that reclamation piece as well, where we're busting through the taboos to talk about it. But let's let's take ownership of it as well. Let us not, let it be overly medicalized or pathologized. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we could just take up, because I know a lot of people talk about the issue that Tracy just raised about restorying, and you raised as well, and about how that happens and what it looks like, because it can be a kind of extraction, can't it, at the same time as a reframing. And I mean, many people do it creatively. And then, for instance, I mean, there was a project that I was a little bit aware of, or a little bit related to, called City Life, where people work with elders who had stories that they wanted told but couldn't themselves tell. So then that did explicitly involve a kind of restorying, because they were not going to be doing that writing themselves, really. And then it was kind of negotiated back with them. And I guess the whole process of playback theatre does something of that, right, Nicola? Because people can adjust, the women can adjust things, they can change things. And I've seen that happen quite a lot. Nira Yuval-Davies did some work with refugees that was very focused on this, and the women and the men would change things all the time and say, no, it wasn't like that. You've got this completely wrong, because the actors were not necessarily them, actually. So that was a difference. But I'm wondering, at the same time, you can give over your entire thesis to the way that people scripted, and then scripted with their bodies, and just a very close description of that, perhaps. But then it sounds like you also have some other quite kind of allyship kinds of aims in your thesis around women and the perimenopause, and how that's going to be what needs to be engaged with. A colleague of mine called Shima Tariq has called this a menopausal transition. So she's not trying to make divisions here. But anyway, you bring something to this, right? So. And this is what the kind of thing that academic advisors often ask you. So what are you bringing to this? And you can definitely have a position, right? And argue that with your participants. You're not going to be in exactly the same place as your participants any more than they are all in the same place as each other. So I'm just wondering how you're negotiating that as you move into the final phase, and what you're putting into this. Yeah.
What am I bringing? What's the point of it all? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, like a lot of the literature that is out there, again, is really looking at it through a medical lens, and then more recent literature is beginning to kind of look at women's experiences, but very little, and women's stories in particular. So there's a sense of really wanting to kind of through this piece anyway, of the humanizing of it really, or the womanizing of the piece, you know, through the actual story. So kind of to really reflect that in this piece of research that we don't really get to see. We get more, you know, again, descriptors, or, you know, women talking about the symptoms, whether that's the hot flashes, or, you know, the anxiety, the depression, the imposter syndrome. But I guess what I don't see written about as much in the literature, and what I hope that this will do, and what the gap is that piece around women wanting to kind of embrace the unknown and the transition, you know, so that's something a little bit different, you know, as opposed to just, yeah, more listing of this is what's happening, but more this kind of more holistic interpretation or representation of women's experience that I don't see so far in the literature. Beginning to see a little bit more of it. There's been more published in the last say 3 years, you know.
I think some of it, I'm just thinking about the work that I was talking about that Shima Tariq did with women with HIV, actually, who are already very aware of their bodies, and also very aware that everything about them is conceptualized in terms of their HIV, rather than that they might be a woman in perimenopause. It's immediately related to HIV. So she did some co-productive work with some of the women as well. So that might be interesting to look at. Anne-Laura's talking about the grey literature also. So I think there is stuff there that they did together in kind of open access publications and stuff. So yeah, it might be interesting. And another woman called Jackie Stevenson, also again working with women with HIV. I think, as I said, because, you know, some women perhaps are more day to day focusing on their bodies, and a chronic illness may involve that, you know. So in a sense that makes them pretty keen to engage with it. So anyway, yeah. But this is a more general project, so
it is, and I think, like, what I feel is that it's saying, listen, go and explore. This needs to be explored in certain contexts, specifically even in the context of sex, for example. But you could do a whole piece around that, you know, women's experiences of sex and sexuality at this time of their life, you know, or specifically just around anxiety. And, you know, so it has many different potential shoot-offs, you know. But coming back to kind of that transition piece as well, one of the an image that came up as well was of the Virgin, the Mother, and the Crone, you know, the embodiment of all three, you know, that these stages that we pass through as women. I guess that, you know, the idea of rites of passage as well, and that all three are where we embody all three, you know, that when we get to the wise, you know, and then there's a reluctance to go to the crone or the wise woman, and the crone, because nobody wants to be the crone, or we see the crone as being something that is ugly, perhaps, you know, but in fact it's the wise woman, you know. And so there was a reluctance there as well to embrace that, you know, a sense of, well, it's a reluctance or a resistance or a not knowing how, and again that is also because of the standards, you know, that we put on ourselves, the pressure to remain youthful, or the body beautiful, or, you know, to kind of keep on top of everything, yet want to be the wise woman, yet pulled back into, you know, needing to look good, or, you know, it's a push-pull. And I guess what another thing that women were saying is, well, where's the space for us to do this? Like, do we have space to do this, or do we have space to even kind of do this deep work, you know, on our own selves, and negotiate this transition? And if you think back again to the HRT or the medical piece, it's like, well, take the hormones and you'll have more energy and you'll be able to get more done, and you'll be, you know, you'll have a pep in your step and whatever else, and as opposed to just going with the natural rhythm of the body, you know. So there's something in there around acceptance as well, isn't there, you know?
Katrina's been waiting, so sorry, Katrina.
Oh, sorry, Katrina.
That's entirely my fault.
Not at all. No, that's fine. I don't mind waiting. I've been thinking about this, sort of taking a step back and looking at it across the ages from a feminist perspective, and thinking, okay, so what do we know about gendered power relations? What do we know about the sort of embodied aspect of these power relations. And I'm thinking, if, you know, we get to a point in our lives where we might be at the peak of our careers, we might have all kinds of strengths and freedoms and opportunities at this point in our life. We might have financial security. There are all kinds of things we might have at this point in our lives. And then we're kind of hit with this specter of, oh, but what you're going through is unattractive and unappealing and horrible, and you're dried up and finished, you know. Like, we need other ways of, this is a really strategic way of disempowering, right? This is a really strategic way of cutting down at the knees, just at the point where you might actually really be able to stand strongly.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you know, how much we need to reframe ourselves in the sense of, I like, you know, you're using images of the crone and the wise woman. That's part of it. And then also finding other images too about, it's not about having to let go of worrying about appearances or thinking about sex in the same way. It's about reclaiming things, thinking things differently, thinking of beauty in other ways than what's in the youth-oriented media images, thinking of strength and beauty and creativity, and really valuing what's going on, because otherwise we're subject to this incredibly disempowering way of thinking, which is very strategic. It's not accidental, it's very strategic, just at this point in life where women can really achieve things and make a difference. I don't know to what extent you are looking from that point of view. That was just my thought.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, yeah, because I don't know whether I would have even, I mean, have called myself a feminist until this moment, you know, until this time in my life. I probably went along with things a lot, you know. Okay, I've always been a strong woman, there's no doubt about it, right? But I would have tended to smooth things out. And back to kind of what Anne-Laure, your question around the academic piece, and you know, for me, what was a real challenge for me was being critical, you know, was to approach a text and be critical about something and dissect it and bring my own opinion in. And that I found myself as someone who maybe stood back. And interestingly, it's now coinciding with this time of my life where I'm thankfully, you know, embracing the transition, but finding my voice actually, you know, and going, let any man try and silence me now, it ain't gonna happen, you know. But there's something in that, certainly. And again, it's back to that kind of parallel process in terms of your own experience as you're doing the research, or, you know, the researcher reflexivity or the practitioner researcher piece. Yeah, so I'm very interested in exactly what you're talking about there, Katrina, your take on it, and I guess looking at it through that lens. I know we're kind of gone over on time now, are we? Or
No, we can go to 6:30.
oh yeah, 6:30. Yeah, because another thing, and I think it kind of lends itself to kind of coming into this point as well, is the root system, what I would refer to as the root system, from, I guess, in terms of my practice as psychotherapist, but looking at the lived experience. What I've noticed, certainly with myself and also through, you know, the research as well, is that at this time, at this juncture, you know, this transition piece, the root system tends or can be activated. So what we have, you know, lived along the way, we may have compressed or pushed down certain aspects of the self, or, you know, not dealt with things because we didn't have time. Maybe we're too busy or raising kids or working hard, or, you know, combination of both. And it starts to come up. It's almost like the roots, you know, they start activating in this period, and they're saying, you know, pay attention, something needs to happen, you know. This and I think that lends itself back towards this growth piece, or this transition, you know. So I think it's all linked in as well, you know. There's almost like the abandoned parts of the self, or, you know, I'm kind of thinking of the story of Bluebeard now. Do you know it? The story of Bluebeard, yeah, and the locked, yeah. and the key, you know, and she can't get the blood out of it. But it's all aspects of the self, you know. So for me, there's something in this time that is about saying pay attention, listen, look, be curious, you know. And I don't read that in the literature at the moment, or I don't hear that either in the discourse, you know, in the public discourse around perimenopause. I see it in pockets, you know. For example, there's a yoga for menopause teacher that I work with, and she's quite incredible, and she would look at it through that lens. But again, they're kind of isolated people, you know, working in the holistic sense around this time. But yeah,
I'm just wondering if we could, you know, ask some of the people who haven't raised questions if there's some resonances with their work. Like Poonam and Judith and Natalia and Manuela are still around, and I wonder if they're doing work in similar kinds of ways. Oh, she's from in Brazil, Manuela. Manuela, hi. Do you have anything to add before you leave, or has she just gone? I'm not sure.
Oh, she's gone.
She's gone. Okay. So there are still a few people around though. And my impression is that they may be here because they have some commonalities with your work. So it'd be really interesting to hear.
It would be lovely, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
We also know what it's like to be accosted.
I think, Laurie, you could probably talk because everyone else is holding back. So.
Definitely, Anna. Thanks for waiting.
Okay. Well, so I'm not looking at anything like that at all. I don't that. Let's put this into inverted commas. But I suppose what I'm interested in is performance. My background is completely different, but I've always been interested in performance and voices and stories and storying and restoring. I love writing dialogues, for instance, and I've written a couple of short, 40 minutes plays for conferences, that sort of thing. Rather than do a classic presentation, I've actually kind of choreographed different experiences and lived experience, particularly around mental health. So this is where I am, and I suppose a lot of what you're talking about really, as I said before, really resonates with me, and it's giving me some confidence, I suppose, in some respect, because I'm at the stage where I'm starting to analyze, using academic jargon, what I've heard from my participants, and trying to find my feet in that is massively difficult, because academia doesn't really leave much room for error. It's a game, it's a process that you have to comply with, and I'm super aware of that. But I'm also interested in listening to everyone who's practicing narrative inquiry, because I think there are a community of people and a community of voices. So yeah, I'm really here to learn and find out what everybody's doing. So that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, isn't it, to have that community, particularly like, when you're in the thick of it, or in your research journey, or it's not something that you've been doing all your life, like having, a group of people around you who you can bounce ideas off or learn with is really important. It certainly has been for me anyway.
Yeah, I just wish I'd had the opportunity to do what you've been able to do and what some people are doing. Being able to do kind of to bring all your voices together, all your women together, to kind of have that dynamic of exchanges and all of that happens on the set.
Yes.
In many ways, it's a set. It's a frame, it's a framework, it's visual. the different angles. Also, I have to say, I'm originally I'm a film graduate, so I see everything through that lens as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wasn't able to do that at all. So it's more like a classic kind of, interview format with people with, with questions, which is just there as prompts, but you're trying to make them like, create a space which is super fluid. It's not always possible. There's also that game for participants who have expectations from you as an academic to ask questions. So it's about resolving all of these different pieces of that narrative inquiry puzzle, which I'm kind of struggling with in my head. I'll stop there because I could go on and say, shut me up.
Oh no. But thank you for reminding me that I'm lucky to have had the experience, because again, it wasn't something that initially I kind of railed against it a little bit because it's something I've sort of been doing my whole life. And I was thinking, I know I just need to be a proper, academic. And then there's a woman called Helen Cara, actually, and she's written a lot around the kind of using arts-based methods in academia. And I attended one of her workshops, and that sort of really just kind of put me back in the loop of it. Plus, I suppose the writing from the body piece, to kind of trust in what I know as well. And I think another reason for, why does anyone do a doctorate, or and from my own point of view, it's around, I guess, synthesizing what I already know, or bringing that together, and writing, like, I guess, about the way that I work and have worked for a very, very long time. So again, like coming back to kind of the little blurb that I would have sent about this, I've spent my whole adult life facilitating people's stories, and listening and restoring, I guess, through the rhythm room as well, specifically, and particularly around marginalized voices, around people with intellectual disability. And so that's been a huge part of my working life, really. It's a labor of love. It's not, it's I don't think you stay so long in something if you love it. And I think for me, certainly in terms of my practice as a psychotherapist, but also, as theatre facilitator and researcher, I love people. I'm really curious about people and humanity. So I think.
Can I ask what the responses have been for the women women participating, actually?
Yeah.
Nicola, and actually how that worked out with the playback theatre, but also just more generally, are they interested in co-producing kind of what we might call outputs out of this, or what are their concerns around the research? What's their kind of involvement or continuing involvement likely to be?
Yeah, again, like all wanted to attend the research because they had an interest in the area. That was definitely, and they felt they wanted to learn more about it, certainly, or opportunity to speak about it. And all really, from what I can gather, and certainly, from being in the room with them on the day, but also subsequent kind of feedback around it, really valued the time and the sense of camaraderie and coming together and shared experience. There was so much in it. It was so alive. There was so much laughing. Like, there was laughing, and then there was, people wanting to kind of hold the women as well. So there was empathy and laughter, and I guess back, the overlap of kind of shared experience, but also, women discovering that there were other experiences attached to that as well. So I guess, like, all are happy for, all have agreed to kind of, the research in the first instance. And in terms of the restoring, I think had I gone with the Machine Aramono, the whole restoring, absolute restoring of it, there would have been a lot of feedback backwards and forwards, but it's not something that I'm going to go down at the moment. But I'm going to go stick to what was agreed within the context of the playback, so people were happy with that. And so, I mean, maybe that's something I need to be exploring more, Corinne, because I get, you know, it's the first time I've really talked about it, or engaged with that idea of going backwards and forwards to the, you know, to the participants, was with my conversations with you, really. You know, that wasn't something that had come up for me, you know, in with my own supervisors, or even in some of the reading that I'd done in the context of what I was doing, you know. So it's
I mean, I'm just thinking from the studies around the menopausal transition that I was telling you about, that there was quite a lot of interesting exchange, particularly one with Jackie Stevenson, where she took material that she was interpreting. She was doing it in a more thematic way, so perhaps she needed to do this, but she took it, she kind of I workshopped the interpretation a little bit with the women. But you know, that's a different situation in a way. She's a woman working with a woman who's not perimenopausal, working with menopausal, perimenopausal women with HIV, and she's not living with HIV. It's a different situation, but and she said it was hard work, so, but she did it within a thesis. So I thought that was an interesting approach. You know, it was kind of a follow-up, but it involved the women in the analysis to some extent, to the step that you might be taking, where you take it into more theoretical or maybe political realms. Anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I offered post, you know, follow-up interviews after the group process as well, and that was interesting. So some women came forward, about 4 women came forward, and the rest declined, you know, or said, you know, it was okay, that they'd felt that they got enough out of it, you know. So that was interesting as well in itself, you know. And one of the reasons I did that was, like, after the 2 weeks, is because after a process like that, you know, it takes time for things to, you know, stuff can keep coming up, you know. And I think, like, from my sense as well, of like, if I've come in contact with people over, you know, over the last kind of year as well, is that the conversation is still ongoing, you know, or in terms of their own experiences of it, you know, of living through this, or making sense of, you know.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point, that we often think, oh, everybody's going to want to continue to be involved in research, and many people are, you know, practicing their own lives. They're just doing things in their own lives. They're not, they don't have the same kind of pull towards research as we might have. So you can offer and offer and offer, and sometimes that's not welcomed. There's a point where you probably want to stop offering.
And again, it comes back to, like, these women being incredibly busy at very busy times in their life. You know, it's that sandwich time, you know, elderly parents or family members, and then maybe perhaps teenage children, or, you know, the job piece as well. So, like, time is very compressed, you know. So I definitely have a sense of that, even myself, you know, in terms of what I'm willing to give my time to, you know, at the moment. Yeah.
Okay to say, Judith, but just that you've encountered quite a lot of these debates before around narrative inquiry and how people react to it, probably in academia. I don't know if you'd like to say anything more about that, but it was an interesting comment.
Missed Judith's comment. Is it there? Oh yeah.
I think it's just in.
Yeah. Oh yes, the embodied corporeal methodologies.
Oh wait, I'm not even seeing that one. Oh, there we go. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, no, Judith is saying that that I think this is okay to say, Judith, just that we've all encountered these kinds of questions about the legitimacy of narrative inquiry and how, and especially certain kinds of narrative inquiry, I'd say, where people are less used to seeing, less used to certain kinds of materials as data, and when they do see it as data, they want to treat it in a kind of data way, and that's not necessarily the way that narrative researchers are going to analyze it.
No, and I mean, that whole analysis process is so, like, you just feel like you're in bed with your data, you know, you're just living, breathing it. And what I did with all of this was like transcribe, you know, the transcribing process, that transcribed it and then spoke it, recorded it, retranscribed, like a listening and re-listening and watching, and you know, and there's so many kind of different avenues. And I like my supervisor laughed as well, because there's a bit in my methodology where I'm describing, you know, where I sort it almost like it's almost like I sort it like I do the laundry. She's like, that's not very, you know, narrative, but you know, it's like, but that's me, you know. So I think we are, as we bring ourselves to the research as well, and like I need to put things in piles that I can make sense of initially, and then you know you begin to kind of weave it, you know. But it was just kind of separating it all out and seeing what really is here, or you know, how do I put it into piles. And that's why I really liked the thematic clusters and that, and the voices within as well. And I guess that frame that the narrative also gave, you know, in terms of the keywords and the actor's embodiment, you know. Yeah, Jocelyn, isn't it? Ruth Jocelyn, who does a lot of
yes.
yeah, on the thematic kind of piece and in the clusters. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, there's some interesting, you know, questions to raise about whether, if you do a purely thematic approach, you know, in some ways you lose the sequencing and the way that people build up meaning within a story, but you're still working with that story material. So
yeah,
I think we can get too pulled into arguments about what precisely narrative analysis should involve, probably.
yeah. It was something that I really, really struggled with. Like I was like, what does it even mean? How am I going to analyze this? Or I couldn't, you know, I was reading so many different things. I was like, what? And then it was the notion of the, you know, the bricolage approach of being able to kind of blend, you know, and take aspects and kind of play with it, you know, in a sense. And I think that's probably what I've always been doing as a theatre practitioner. I mean, you learn your craft, but you improvise, you play with it, you know.
Yeah, sure. You do, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that with narrative work. It does take a bit of I don't know about confidence, but just belief in, yes, confidence, I guess. And I think it's helpful. You know, I think you were saying, somebody, or maybe it was Anne-Laura saying, you know, oh well, it's quite hard to have the just to be able to do the work and not think all the time about the references. But actually, in a sense, what you think of as intuition, by the time you've been reading and in a kind of conceptual engagement with this field, or any of your relevant fields really enough, I feel like that's become your intuition. So in a way, you're already working within that field. You don't have to see that big break between how you respond to things, you might say intuitively, and your academic engagement, because that becomes part of you anyway.
I would agree with you, Corinne. I really feel that's happening for me now. You know, it took a while, but you know, it's like I'm getting, you know, I'm getting a sense of the reading that I've done and locating myself within that, you know.
Judith's got a really interesting comment here. I don't know if you want to take a look and maybe come in, Judith, if you want to. About, you know, the continuing difficulties. We're saying, you know, it can be done, but you're emphasizing that it's a kind of a difficult practice to be engaged in.
Well, I mean, taking space, it's, yeah. Feeling entitled to it, you know, that it's all right to take the space. That's something that I'm learning.
I think Judith may no longer be here, but I can't see her on the
She may have
participants.
gone. Yeah, no, I don't see her. She's gone.
And it is kind of time to wind up, but I think
yeah.
Oh, no worries, Judith, no worries. Yeah.
She is here.
She says that she's got a microphone problem, but thank you for that comment, because that's a useful corrective to being over optimistic. I think. And also Anne-Laura's comments about external examiners. I think it's become more possible now to find external examiners who are going to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, think that's become more.
Do you guys understand what I'm doing? Does it make sense? Can you see why I took the playback route and the arts approach? Yes. Absolutely. Okay, good. Yeah. Because I mean, that's the thing. It needs to be able to translate to people as well, to both lay and academic, you know, people that they know what you're doing, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think once you can kind of stand over what you've done and the reasons for doing it, then, you know, and you know, it's backed up with the right amount of literature, etc., then it should be okay.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. Thank you. I think we should wrap up. It's past
Okay, thank
6:30,
you so
but
much.
Thank you,
Thanks so much.
everybody. Thanks. It's
Yeah,
been
thank
really
you,
illuminating.
everybody. And Corinne, thanks for inviting me, and really appreciate it. And I hope I get to bump into you now in the summer.
No, definitely. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing your work. And you know, when it comes out, you know, don't forget we have an e-list. In fact, what I'm going to put in the chat is just the email if people want to join the e-list.
Great.
Because we put out announcements of people's recent work. So if you want to just write to this Gmail, you can get put on the list. And I can see somebody here who came in late. Michelle, lovely to see you, who I knew from a long time ago, working in London. So nice to see you, Michelle. Yeah, everybody, thank you for this lovely discussion, and hopefully we'll hear more about Nicola's work as things progress.
Yeah,
Really,
thanks
thank
so
you
much.
so much. It's really been
Okay,
great.
have a lovely evening, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.